about how Congressman Ron Paul. How are you, sir?
Good, Jack. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I don't know where you are right now on the national campaign and doing your day job, but thanks for joining us, Congressman. We're approaching the holidays, and in this course of this election, we're less than 2 months to the New Hampshire primary, and it still seems that jobs in this economy is number one story. And I think most people don't understand what the super committee in Washington, kind of what it is, and they know they're supposed to be cutting, but they're not optimistic that anything's really going to come out of this. And can you put this in context for us as a member of Congress, what this super committee is? Do you think they're going to achieve the cuts that they're supposed to achieve? Where's this at, Congressman?
I don't think they're getting anywhere at all, and I don't think much good will come of it because it shouldn't have ever been formed. A couple months ago when they were trying to raise the national debt limit, they ran into an impasse, so they sort of said, well, let's set up this committee, and these 12 members will make a proposal, then we'd have an up and down vote in the Congress. Of course, that whole process is unconstitutional. But the problem is the Congress, as well as this committee, is they're unwilling to admit, the country is bankrupt. We've spent way beyond our means, and that it's much more serious than they believe in, that we ought to cut spending significantly and change our way of living. Our government's just too big and does more things than they should, but they won't touch that. So therefore, I think they're just going to keep doing this. So I don't expect anything really of value to come out of this committee nor out of Congress in the near future because of their unwillingness to really consider cuts. In contrast to that, my proposal was to, if we're serious, we'd cut $1 trillion out of the budget, and it has to be this year. I mean, the first year or the year of the budget. Because if not, if you cut $1 trillion over the next 10 years on proposed increases, it's nothing. It won't reassure the markets.
Congressman Paul, you look at what's happening or what maybe will happen or almost happen or who knows how to describe or characterize Italy and Greece, leadership changes, incredible public debt. You look at every state in the last year, but I think North Dakota and Alaska, because of oil, incredible historic state deficits. You look at the blowing through the $15 trillion debt limit, I think yesterday in our country that you just alluded to. It's very clear that there's a spending problem, and we have overspent. Why? I don't sense the public or politicians in general, not necessarily the Republicans running, but certainly the current administration, really is at the point yet that that this debt is as much a crisis as it really is here. And some analysts are saying that we could slip into recession at the beginning of 2012 because of the Eurozone debt crisis. Why is it America and our leaders, I'm not saying you've been consistent, you've been talking about this in fairness more and longer and steadfast than anyone else that this day was going to happen. The day seems here, Congressman, and yet Americans, I don't know if they're really there in accepting it.
No, they're not willing to accept it because what they're afraid of is that they'll have their benefits cut. But I think I'd qualify that a little bit. There's a lot that are in that category, but there are a lot who are catching on. They're sick and tired of paying for it. But the people in Washington, I don't think quite have gotten this message because we've gone through probably 70 or 80 years, especially since the Depression, that millions of Americans have been taught economics the wrong way. They were taught that deficits really aren't bad.
Right.
And some conservatives and liberals have been taught that.
You're right. I remember in my macroeconomics class, there was talk about that sometimes deficits aren't such a bad thing.
Yeah, and they just think that. As a matter of fact, the Keynesian liberals argue that the whole problem that we're facing today is a lack of spending. That you have to, and the people should spend more money, although they're maxed out on their credit cards, and students can't even get a job, and students coming out of college owe $1 trillion. But then they say, well, if they can't do it, then the government has to do it. So they do exactly opposite of what a free market economist says we should do. We should back off, live within our means, provide an environment where businesses will come back and shrink the deficit. But so it's we're in a conflict, but we're at a dead end because the continuing to spend is going to just make things much worse. And everything depends on the dollar, whether it's Europe and Greece and everybody and every state. We have so far been able to print the money when we needed it. And it's still being done, and there's still a bit of trust in the dollar because people will still use our dollars. But the debt is so huge that there is no way that this can happen. And you know, our credit was downgraded once. It's getting ready to be downgraded again. And these deficits have just exploded. They're going up exponentially. And I don't think if the people in Washington knew how serious this was, they would cut spending. But so far, we're not very close to it.
Congressman, President Obama is visiting New Hampshire next Wednesday. He's going to talk about his jobs bill. I thought that was dead when the Senate has not even passed it, and they're led by Harry Reid. But here's my question. No doubt he's going to come to New Hampshire, and he's going to say that you can't deal with this deficit without not only dealing with the deficit and cutting, but raising revenue, code for raising taxes. And he's going to make his case, as he's done, you know, pretty much from day one, that the wealthiest are not paying their fair share. And he'll define that, even though he'll talk about Warren Buffett, and I don't want to hear that anymore personally. He'll define that as in people in New Hampshire, or he won't say this, but anyone making over $200,000 or a couple making $250,000 on their gross adjusted income need to pay more. He says corporations aren't paying their fair share, even though we're paying 35% at corporate tax. My point is, he's going to, you know, the rich and the wealthier and the better off people aren't paying enough. Can our deficit crisis be settled without raising taxes, in your opinion?
Well, it better be, because if you just raise taxes, it makes our problem worse because you chase more businesses overseas and you never get the revenues that you think you're going to get. So that would be devastating. But one thing that we could look at...
So the president's wrong. The president's wrong, in your opinion.
Absolutely. But there's one thing that I would qualify on this as a reflection of what's going on Wall Street, the Occupy Wall Street. When there are rich people out there that are being resented when they got it off the taxpayers, when they got bailed out and they get special contracts, yes, that's the kind of stuff. You don't just raise taxes on them. You just deny them, you know, access to the Treasury, and you deny the, you know, easy credit for them. You don't bail them out. And I think that type of resentment is justified, but that isn't raising taxes on the rich. So unfortunately, because people don't quite understand it, they see some people benefiting unfairly, and they say, oh, they're benefiting unfairly, let's raise taxes on the rich. But then you punish the people who are productive. So I think we have to have a better attitude, a better understanding of what government's role should be, and it certainly shouldn't be bailing out everybody and serving the special interests.
Okay, so before we let you go, Congressman Ron Paul, New Hampshire today, really like having you on. Okay, something's wrong with this picture, Congressman. I had Governor Perry on yesterday, and I talked about national media and his race. There's something wrong with this picture. The national media, the talking heads on cable TV at night, will gloss right over Ron Paul, and they'll talk about Mitt Romney, and they'll talk about Newt Gingrich. And yet, when you turn around, Ron Paul is rising in the polls. Newt Gingrich is rising in the polls. You're now in second place in the first-in-the-nation presidential primary in the latest, I think it was Bloomberg News poll. Mitt Romney, yes, he has a commanding lead, but all these other candidates, Perry, Kaine, Gingrich, and so on, Huntsman, Santorum, Bachmann, it's Ron Paul. Okay, so why do the national pundits, you know, kind of gloss over you as someone who could upset a lot of races here?
I don't know the answer because they do it. It could be understood if they didn't want me to be seen as a contender, and they could deliberately do it, and a lot of people believe that is the case, but I don't know for sure because it's their motivation. But I suspect that there are some things where I want to rock the boat pretty good. I want to change foreign policy. I'm addressing the subject of the Federal Reserve, which nobody else has ever done it. I challenge the welfare state. I want to, you know, reinforce the determination to follow the rule of law in all areas and follow the Constitution. That's challenging a lot of people, so they just don't, I believe they don't like to see that much of a challenge to the status quo. But what they don't realize is if we continue to do what we're doing now, believe me, we're in for some very bad times. Okay,
as we say goodbye, what did you do last week to Governor Perry of Texas? He just looked at you on that stage. Did you unnerve him? Did you unnerve him and rattle him so much that you made him forget the third department he wanted to eliminate in energy?
I wouldn't claim that, but when I saw that he was having a little trouble, when he was talking about his 3, I said, but you want 5, not just 3.
Yeah.
And then he did get a little, but then I tried to say HUD, you know, or something. But it turned out I've got a few laughs out of that afterwards, and he did too. He and I shared some laughs over it, and I guess that's the best thing he could do. So it was interesting.
All right, thank you, Ron Paul. Look forward to having you again soon. Thank you, Ron Paul, live on New Hampshire Today. All right, we're going to switch gears, go live now to Washington Talk Radio. Meeting